right. Hello and welcome back to Real Seekers. I'm your host, Dale,
Hello.
the Real Seeker. And yep, hey there, Giulio. We've got Giulio Fanti back to continue on with our Shroud Panel Review sessions. And today we're kind of doing a follow-up show to a previous show we did, Part 3A. And Part 2, where we addressed some of Giulio's arguments and some of the evidences that he says can prove the Shroud is not medieval and in fact dates to the 1st century. So yeah, that's what we're talking about today. Hope Giulio, you've been on the show. Do you want to kind of just introduce again the audience? How you've been and what are some of the new updates you've been working on for the Shroud?
Yes, I actually have to apologize if I was only now able to answer the various questions and doubts that have been raised in the previous interviews, because I am working in parallel on several jobs that I consider very interesting and fascinating. Among them, I have just delivered the draft of a new book titled The Holy Fire and the Divine Photography, the Image of the Holy Shroud of Christ. In this book, I formulate a new hypothesis of formation of the Holy Shroud body image based on the interaction of bodily fluids emitted by the corpse of Jesus Christ wrapped in the shroud and mixed with an amalgam of aloe and myrrh with electric energy supplied by the discharges produced by lightning, very similar to those we can admire every Holy Saturday of the Orthodox Easter inside the edicule of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. I am also studying the blood traces left on the flax fibers taken from the Holy Shroud to deepen the results that I have already published in 2 recent scientific papers. Can you please show photo 1?
Yep. So I'll just share my screen here. And photo 1. All right, there you go.
Okay, perfect. In fact, after having clarified that traces of iron oxide and mercury sulfate are present in some bloodstains but are not responsible for the reddish color of the blood traces, I am trying to better characterize the particular red substance of clearly organic origin compatible with the blood. In fact, it seems that countless erythrocytes, commonly called red blood cells, are present scattered along all the fibers, both in small clusters and arranged individually. The characteristics under investigation is their micrometric size, much smaller than that of common human erythrocytes, of about 7 micrometers, which I could indicate, which could indicate 2 interesting factors. The first one is the confirmation that Jesus of the Holy Shroud was highly dehydrated, as actually reported in the Gospels, and that the corpse was wrapped in a mixture of antiputrid substances, including aloe, as effectively confirmed in the Gospels, the presence of which, from experimental tests, appears to be even capable of halving the average size of human erythrocytes. Okay, you can close the slide.
All right.
Question 2.
Question 2. Okay, yeah. So I just want you to kind of outline and explain your statistical approach to linking the Shroud Man with those Justinian coins, those 692 to 695 solidus coins, and what were the results you got?
First of all, I must comment that the interview pertained to the following questions seems to me to refer to an initial edition of the probabilistic approach published in the book The Shroud of Turin, 1st century after Christ. Can you show, please, photo 2? Later, widely improved in the new specialized book by numismatic point of view, entitled Coins Influenced by the Shroud of Christ, which, however, has not been mentioned in the interview, and which, in my opinion, should be instead be considered its new details, as you see in the photo. Consequently, I will comment on the detail on the initial statistical approach published in the first book, and then I will mention the developments made to this model in the more specialized second book. The idea of developing a probabilistic model arose from the fact that I wanted to show, to somehow quantify numerically the overwhelming evidence regarding the fact that the face of Jesus Christ was taken as a model in Byzantine coinage starting from 692 AD. This was done just when, in the same year, the Council of Nicaea approved, after more than 6 centuries, the possibility of reducing the face of reproducing the face of Christ in art by replacing other symbols such as the lamb or the fish. This therefore implies that the age of the most important relic of Christianity is significantly earlier than the Middle Ages, as someone still persists in claiming without any acceptable support. At the beginning of my project, the task was not easy, given that two coins engraved by hand by the same Byzantine engraver are very rarely found. We must also know that in the absence of magnifying glasses, each engraver chose to reproduce only a few typical details of the face that he wanted to reproduce in dimension of a few millimeters, tenths of an inch, necessarily leaving out other. Among the various reproductions of the face of Christ, first minted by Justinian II in 692 AD, and I have observed several dozen of them, I choose that was well preserved to better highlight its details. On this coin, depicting the face of Christ with the inscription Jesus Christ, King of the Rulers, shown on the edge, I have defined a dozen somatic features typical of Jesus of the Holy Shroud, and I have tried to quantify the possibility that the Byzantine engraver who minted that coin and to obtain that result without having had the opportunity to see the face of Jesus Christ of the Shroud. It seemed to me that the best approach was the probabilistic one, well defined by inferential statistics, which consists of the set of statistical techniques that allow us to generalize the results obtained from the data collected on one sample, the population from which it was extracted. Consequently, for each of the 12 somatic features highlighted, I subjectively assigned the corresponding probability that the Byzantine engraver had obtained that result, regardless of the observation of the image in question, that of the Holy Shroud. For example, The face of Christ on the Holy Shroud shows swollen cheekbones, the right more evident than the left, due to the numerous beatings suffered, and the coin under examination shows these characteristics very well. From a probabilistic point of view, I therefore thought that the Byzantine engraver had only one probability out of 15 of deciding arbitrarily without any reference model to reproduce this very uncommon result. Combining with the probabilistic method, the various probability assigned for each of the 12 somatic features taken into consideration for the principle of compound probabilities, and on the basis of the use of the Bayes formula applied to two mutually exclusive events, it asked that the hypothesis into consideration whether true or false. It turned out that the Byzantine engraver executing the coin in question had only 7.26 probability out of a billion of obtaining that face on the coin of Justinian II without having seen the image of Jesus of the Holy Shroud. Obviously, someone can criticize the result by stating that this depends on the subjective choice of the probability assigned by me of the occurrence of a certain feature of the coin under consideration. This is true, but for a moment I have not been able to apply a probabilistic method that is fully objective. However, in the new, more specialized book, I want to test the robustness of the previously obtained result by acting in the following way. Considering the same coin of Justinian II, I first of all took into consideration a dozen somatic characteristics, not all the same as those previously considered. Then I assign a probabilistic uncertainty to the probabilities previously defined by necessity in a subjective way in order to include all the possible different subjective assignments hypothetically made by other possible analyses. I then calculated the range of uncertainty to be assigned to a final result. The new probabilistic model produced the following result. The Byzantine engraver had only 1 in 10 billion chances of getting the face of Justinian II coin without having seen the image of Jesus on the Holy Shroud. However, the range of resulting values varies from 5 probabilities in a billion to 2 probabilities in 10 million billion. Therefore, the previous statistical analysis performed on different somatic features with different assigned probabilistic values is included in the range of uncertainty estimated by the new method, thus confirming the robustness of the probabilistic results obtained. A better understanding of the meaning of these results, one chance over 10 billion, can be seen in the example referring a roulette game. It would correspond to the chance of hitting the same number 12 consecutive times. Similarly, in the roll of a dice with 6 faces, it would correspond to the chance of having the same number 24 consecutive times. In support of the probabilistic result obtained, There are also more than 100 points of congruence determined by other scholars like Alan Wonger on similar coins and the study of numismatist Mario Moroni. This confirms that the Byzantine engravers who modeled the face of Christ on the gold solidus of Justinian II certainly saw the Holy Shroud or a good copy of it. Okay.
Okay, cool. Stop sharing. And all right, awesome. So thank you so much, Giulio, for that. Obviously, for the audience, we're talking about in our panel review number 2, where we were talking about the statistical argument that Giulio's got there. So, one thing I want to ask you, Giulio, for question 3, are you familiar with Justin Robinson's work? He's a royal member of the Royal Numismatic Society, and he's kind of done his own study of the bronze coins. So I was just wondering, what's your take on his work?
I do not personally know Justin Robinson, who demonstrated that in 1969 AD, John I Tizmizes, Byzantine emperor from 1969 to 1967, put the face of Jesus very similar to that of the Holy Shroud on his bronze circulating follis coins. He also says that the comparability of these coins to the shroud is even better than with the gold solidus coins that are used to make comparison with the shroud in the probabilistic model. I must first note that this statement makes me think that Justin Robinson had not read my books on Byzantine coinage concerning the Holy Shroud. You can show again photo number 2. And then I have various comments to make on this statement. One,
Photo number 2.
I fully agree that the coin mentioned by Justin Robinson depicts a face of Christ copied from the Holy Shroud. And I agree that this depiction is very faithful to the original, demonstrating that most likely the Byzantine engraver had the opportunity to directly observe the body image of the Holy Shroud. Point 2. I must, however, observe that a single coin can't be very representative of the whole coinage of a certain period under consideration, as, for example, indicated in photo 3. Can you please show photo 3?
Yep.
Okay. Here we see that during the same period of Emperor John I, other bronze follies were minted with faces that were also slightly different from each other, but always inspired to the Holy Shroud. The face of Jesus of the Holy Shroud on the top left on the image can be compared with the coinage of Christ of the coin in question, and with other 7 bronze follies of the same Emperor John I. For example, we see that all they have asymmetrical long hair, longer to the left in accordance with what we see on the Holy Shroud, but not all faces have a split beard. And this shows that not all the Byzantine engravers bothered to reproduce all the particular details of Christ's face of the Holy Shroud, also due to the operational difficulties in reproducing such small images on coins. It is true that I do take only one coin into consideration for the probability calculation, but as I have already explained, this was due to the difficulty of including all the innumerable coins of Christ minted during the Byzantine Empire into one only probabilistic calculation. In the book, however, I have considered all these types of coin, and I have commented on them one by one, arriving at showing how the general overview of this coinage demonstrates without a shadow of doubt that the Holy Shroud was certainly used as a model to reproduce the face of Christ in Byzantine coins. Point 3, the last. As I observed in my second book, we must remember that gold coins were less frequent than bronze ones, and their minting was always controlled by and approved by the emperor. However, I don't think that this also happened for the bronze coins, which were much more numerous. And just for this reason, I prefer to give a greater importance to the representation present on gold or silver coins rather than on the bronze ones.
Stop sharing.
Okay.
Stop sharing. Yep. Okay. All right. Awesome. All right. Cool. So, one thing I want to ask about is our favorite Shroud skeptic, Hugh Ferry. He showed us an image of about 22 of these gold solidus coins that you look at, and he was saying that well, they have the following problematic features. So, for example, they show Jesus holding a book with his other hand, making like a V shape type deal. And then also they have many figures of Jesus with ears on them, whereas your coins, Jesus didn't have ears, like with the Shroud of Turin. And then also most coins show Jesus with different types of beards. So, on some of these coins, he's got a rounded beard, he's got a forked beard or a wet beard, different types of beards. So they're not all the same. And then he also says on the different coins, the proportions between the eyes and the nose, they're all out of whack. They're not all consistent. So I was just wondering, what do you make of some of Hugh Ferry's alleged differences on some of the coins for question 4?
This is a very articulate question, and I must answer point by point. Point A. As an initial note, I must say that certain skeptics, even if ignorant of the matter, pose as experts in order to denigrate at any cost the very interesting particularities of the Holy Shroud and the historical reference linked to it. Obviously, we need to teach these persons that the book held in the left hand of Jesus Christ is the book of the Gospels, and that the right hand is raised in attitude of blessing, according to the Byzantine tradition, and therefore must not have anything in reference at Holy Shroud. In fact, the Greek Orthodox iconography, as also in early Christian iconography, the gesture of blessing hand actually shapes the letter ECXC, an abbreviation for the Greek word Jesus Christ. I don't read the Greek corresponding, which includes the first and last letter of each word. See for photo 4. Can you please show photo 4? So
Yep.
we see the end in question. The hand that blesses reproduces with gesture the name of Jesus, the name above every name. In addition to shaping letters, the gesture of blessing made by Christ also conveys doctrinal truths. The 3 fingers below, used to spell the I and X, also represent the Trinity, the unity of one God in the 3 persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. The bringing the thumb and the ring finger together to the touch not only forms the letter C, but also symbolize the incarnation, the union of the divine and human nature in the person of Christ. The reference to the most important relic of Christianity in the Byzantine coin under discussion is therefore only aimed at the characteristics of the clearly tortured face. Point B, regarding the ears. In my opinion, when one necessarily wants to attack something that is unassailable, like the Holy Shroud, he is forced to nitpick and therefore to make not interesting statements. As I pointed out in my last book on Byzantine coins, it was not possible for Byzantine engravers to reproduce all the particular features of Christ's face on the Holy Shroud within millimeters, tenth of an inch. Therefore, these engravers started from predefined models of human faces and gradually added some of the many details detectable on the Holy Shroud. Here, someone, but not all, as we have seen before, highlighted the characteristic of the split beard, and someone else highlighted the lack of ears of Jesus on the Holy Shroud. For example, in my new book, I reported a rare coin. Can you please show photo 5? I reported a very rare coin. It's only one I have seen in circulation, which depicts the disheveled Jesus shown in this figure. In fact, according with Canon 882 of Turin Council, the bloodstains could not be reproduced in images of Christ. Hence, the artist thought of reproducing the traces of blows as tufts of hairs. The coin of Justinian II in the photo therefore reproduces Christ disheveled precisely to show the shape and position of the wounds of Jesus detectable on the Holy Shroud. Regarding point C, regarding the different types of beard, still the skeptics try in vain to appeal to some trivialities in order to show the listening publics that they are right. As I have just said, no Byzantine engraver was able to reproduce in a few millimeters, tenths of an inch, all the particular feature of the face of Jesus of the Holy Shroud. So here someone dwelt on the split beard. Other, like the one of Justinian's second coin of the cover of my latest book, can you please show photo 2? Overlooks these details by reporting a common beard. So in my second book, you see that the beard is common, not split. Regarding the proportion of the eyes and the nose, this is a delicate answer that I try to synthesize here. And here is another gratuitous and unjustified accusation, typical of skeptics without valid arguments. Unfortunately, this type of accusation is very effective against an audience that can't be required to know many truths related to specialized aspects known only to some expert in the specific sector. And for this reason, skeptics use this accusation to spread simply inconsistent claims to get the public on their side. In section 7.1 on page 236 of my book, I develop in detail a quantitative analysis of the numismatic characteristics of the Byzantine coins depicting the face of Christ, and on page 238-39 of the second book, I discuss using two plots. Can you please show photo 6? I discuss using two plots the results of the proportion between eyes and nose. There I write what follows in my book. The ratios of the Justinian II gold solidi have to be compared with that of the shroud, which results in R ratio 1.28. A mean value of 1.09 resulted with a standard deviation of 0.10. Respectively, the maximum and the minimum values are of 1.28 and 0.88. This shows that all the values are smaller or equal than that of the shroud, but the mean value of 1.09 is quite high with respect to the reference mean values of 1.00 and 0.96. In light of the shroud, the following consideration may be extracted. The relatively high variability of R is the ratio, can be explained by the fact that not all the engravers working in officines, the workplaces, distant from the place where the shroud was displayed, had the possibility to look at the relic in order to make a good copy of the face of Jesus Christ. The influence of the face of the shroud having R equal to 1.28 on the engravers copying it increased the mean value of R equal to 1.09 from the reference one of 1.00 and 0.96. Among the 18 faces of Christ take into consideration, only one of them had an R value equal to that of the shroud, and two of them greater or equal to 1.20, probably corresponding to engravers who had the occasion to view the relics of a good copy of it. The gold solidus, having a ratio of 1.28 equal to that of the shroud, is the rare coin showing the various tufts of hair corresponding to the ones visible on the shroud in their specific location that I have shown before. So it is easy to think that the engraver of this coin and the occasion to study the relic directly and carefully. Last point, the gold solidus having a higher value of 1.28 shows other interesting details of the shroud, like the lack of ears, thus indicate a probable direct observation of the shroud on the part of the engraver. The histogram of 18 R values relative to the measured face of Christ on coins of Justinian II on the right of the figure, showing roughly a Gaussian behaviors, summarize this consideration. I have finished.
All right, awesome. All right, cool. So yeah, thank you for tackling those four things in a lot of detail. Because I think a lot of people were worried about what Hugh Ferry had to say there. Now turning to question 5, Bob Rucker, he is a Pro-Shroud guy, and he kind of expressed some skepticism regarding the maths, the statistical calculations themselves, and how you can get an exact number of I think in your we quoted 7 out of a billion, but your new results are even more improbable, 1 chance in 10 billion or something like that. So Bob Rucker expresses, like, how can you demonstrate a proper statistical basis to provide an accurate objective probability for something like that? And in your calculation, are you taking account of the various probabilistic resources? So, for example, Hugh Ferry talked about, having 400. If you flip a coin 10 times and get heads, but if you flip not just one coin but 400 coins, you have 400 replicational resources, and that increases your chances. Or there's specificational resources, right? So you're specifying certain features, but you admit that other features of the shroud have been left off. So, like, are you taking account of those other specificational resources, if that makes sense? So question 5, yeah.
Okay, there are 3 points. I begin with the first one. If I understand correctly, you say that Hugh Ferry and Bob Rucker state that they are unsure how one would be able to demonstrate a proper statistical basis to provide an accurate objective probabilities as you claim to have done. And in this case, I must say that they are perfectly correct. In fact, I don't know that it is possible to assign a perfectly objective probability in the probabilistic model that I have treated. I have already explained this before, clarifying how I then tried to circumvent the problem by assigning a suitable band of statistical uncertainty to the statements considered. Incidentally, I know that some persons go out of their way to denigrate my scientific studies, my scientific results, because they are irritated by these results that clearly confirm the full authenticity of the Holy Shroud. Point 2. I have explained earlier in quite some detail why I only consider one coin, and I don't want to repeat myself here. Instead, I am amazed by the statement you report here about the tosses of 400 coins, which appear clearly biased and tendencies, and formulated to deceive the public. Let's see the proposed example. Since I have a 50% chance of getting heads or tails from a two-sided coin, by the principle of compound probabilities, I have 0.5 multiplied by 10 times by itself, and I get 1 over 1024. That means 0.000976. In other words, I have 1 in 1024 chance of getting heads or tails on the same coins after 10 tosses. If instead I have 400 coins, for the principle of the total probabilities, I have to multiply the result just obtained for a single coin by 400, and I get a probability of 0.39. That is, I have one probability on I have one probability on 2.56 of getting 10 heads or 10 tails on at least one of the 400 coins thrown. But in the case of coins, and here is the malice of the sentence, I didn't go looking for the coin that met my requirements among the 400 coins available on the market. Instead, I looked for a coin that was as representative as possible of all the 400 examined. In any event, in the case under consideration, if we had 7 probabilities out of a billion chance for a single coin, we would have about 3 possibilities of a million billion if we could have chosen the coin out of 400. Still practically a result tending to zero, which would demonstrate again the impossibility for the engraver to mint that coin without having seen the Holy Shroud. But given that all the 400 coins under analysis have the same feature, the probability remains those declared of 7 out of a billion chance. I challenge who have made this objection to provide me with a gold solidus of Justinian II, minted between 692 and 695, depicting the face of Christ in good condition of his own choice, and which does not lead to a result similar to the one I have obtained.
Awesome.
Other point, obviously, the probabilistic models that I have considered are simplification of the physical reality under analysis, and consequently, it would be almost impossible to consider all the features present in the image of the face considered. Just for this reason, in the new book, I wanted to perform a statistical analysis based on points different from those considered in my previous book, and I have seen that the result practically remains unchanged. The Byzantine engraver must have seen the Holy Shroud of a beautiful reproduction of it. I also respond to the malicious insinuations that notes the lack of having considered in the probabilistic model characteristics that are present on the face of the coin, but which are not present on the shroud image. Indeed, in the necessarily simplified model, I did not take those characteristics into consideration because I consider them of minimal importance, and therefore they would have complicated both the modeling and the calculation of the result for no valid reason. Let's take an example. The face of Christ of the gold solidus subjected to probabilistic analysis show the ears as all humans' faces, while the face of Jesus on the Holy Shroud does not. As I have already said, the Byzantine engravers did not take care of reproducing of all the features observed on the relic. It reproduces the images on the coins, and among those, sometimes also that of the ears. But if we wanted to introduce the negative feature into the probabilistic model, we could state that the probability that ears are visible on a human face is at least 99 out of 100 chances. Therefore, introducing this additional information of the model, we would have to multiply the obtained results of 7 out of a billion chance by 0.99, and practically the result would remain unchanged.
Gotcha. Awesome. All right. Thank you. That question was really important to me, is like that basis for your probability calculation. So thank you for that. So, all right, cool. So that kind of covers all the objections and challenges that I heard about the numismatic coins argument that we discussed in my Shroud Panel Review Part 2. I now want to kind of turn to what we discussed, your 4 empirical or physical tests for dating the Shroud to the 1st century that we covered in our panel review Part 3, 3A. So the first question is just to have you kind of explain. Question 6. Can you explain, your FTIR and Raman spectroscopy and your tensile strength test, and as well your newest X-ray dating tests and what the results were for that?
To answer to this question is insufficient details. The listeners would first need to have taken specific courses regarding the method I used.
Okay.
However, I think it is enough for them to know that to carry out these dating methods, some optical, chemical, and mechanical properties of the flex fibers were chosen, which show changes that can be quantified over time on the basis of appropriate physical laws. To achieve this, we proceeded according to the following steps. We have identified a material property which varies over time and which should not visibly depend on other factors. We used a sufficiently numerous series of reference samples, ancient linen fabrics in our case, for the calibration of the method and the definition of the equation of the treated model. Before proceeding further, we thought and found theoretical confirmation of our obtained experimental results, also verifying the independence of the results from other effects such as temperature and humidity. We measured the property under examination by introducing the sample taken from the Holy Shroud into a commercially available or purpose-built machine, as in the mechanical case, capable of providing the age of the sample under test. We proceeded according to this scheme in the measurement of the representative parameters with the four methods. FTIR and Raman, which are based on infrared and laser optical analysis. Tensile strength, which is based on the mechanical strength of the single flex fiber, and X-ray detection of cellulose depolymerization. In all cases, we obtain results contrary to the carbon-14 dating of 1988, which we know is scientifically unreliable for various reasons, but all extraordinarily coinciding with a dating to the first century after Christ, the time when Jesus Christ lived in Palestine. Okay.
Gotcha. Awesome. All right, cool. Okay, so just a couple general objections to these dating methods. One of the things that I mentioned to you last time when you were on our show is that, look, a lot of shroud skeptics, they question the general reliability because these dating methods are very new and they haven't been accepted in wider scholarship. So what do you make of the fact that these methods haven't really been widely accepted in scholarship outside of shroud studies?
All this superficial and tendencial criticism made by people who are often ignorant of the subject and who therefore probably do not sufficiently understand the subject being treated are irritating and annoying. These seem to me almost always criticism formulated on the basis of a non-scientific, preconceived objective of another origin, perhaps even religious, which they want to satisfy at any cost, even ignoring the evidence, the goal of having to demonstrate that the Holy Shroud is not authentic.
Gotcha.
For example, it is here stated more or less directly that the method of mechanical dating of flex fiber is not reliable because no one but me has used it to date the archaeological finds. But before defining a method that is at least interesting, is anyone who makes this denigration aware of what it needs to be done to obtain a reliable result? Does he know that at least 20 fibers selected as free from defects must be taken under a microscope and glued into suitable specially constructed supports? Is he aware that typically with the current procedure being improved, about half of the fibers fail to give reliable results for various mechanical assembly problems? Does he know that to get the only Shroud results I had to employ my university students for 100 hours? Does he know that it is, if used for commercial purposes, a single result obtained from this method would be economically unfeasible because it would have a cost at least of $12,000?
Mm.
To make a parallel, the news has recently come out that a method for obtaining nuclear fusion has been discovered in the United States. However, it has stated that it will take at least 50 years before the discovery can be used by the population to obtain clean energy. Well, let's wait we too for another 50 years and we will see if the mechanical dating method will be engineered and used for archaeological purposes.
Gotcha. Awesome. All right, cool. Well, one kind of follow up with this, and again, it's going to be one you don't like, but I have heard some Shroud skeptics question the possibility of fraud in terms of your work. So, with question 8 here, for example, how do we know that the samples you got do actually come from the Shroud itself? So, I wanted you to kind of answer this, like, how do you answer to the question of fraud, and how do we trace the samples you're using for these methods to the Shroud itself?
This is a wicked question, and I hope you just pass on the thought of others without sharing it. And you think I have spent over 25 years of my life on a fraud? I'll answer you with a fact. In 1988, during the sample of the Holy Shroud for carbon 14 dating, cameras were used for several hours to objectively document the sampling. But these cameras did not record the moment in which the expert went to another room to seal the samples just taken. This lack of visual documentation may suggest that there was a replacement of the samples taken from the Holy Shroud with other of known data. Similarly to what you implied, if there is no a minimum of confidence in the experimenter, then I could say that the 1988 C14 date is false because the samples have been replaced. As for my Holy Shroud samples, see photo number 7. Can you please show it, please? I officially received them with signed documentation, which I also published in my book written with Pier Andrea Malfi. In this photo, we see on the left the cover of the book where the following documents are published. In the center, one of the various deliveries to me by the 3M Foundation of Milano Segrate, and on the right, the document transferred to me by Stera Inc. of samples of stick tapes taken from Ray Rogers in 1978. I finally must observe that the linen samples from the Shroud, can you please show photo 8? These samples are easy to recognize because they have very rare physical and optical features. As seen in the photo above, the Holy Shroud threads have a zeta twist, that is the opposite of S twist that almost all woven linen threads have. Furthermore, you can see in the figure below the coloring of the individual fibers coming from the Holy Shroud have a particular shape if they are seen in a cross-polarized light under a petrographic microscope. We also see on the right that the same fiber of the Holy Shroud changes its coloration if the polarization angle is rotated. Obviously, I carried out checks of these types on the samples officially supplied to me.
Awesome. All right, thank you very much for that. I knew you didn't like that question, but still, Shroud skeptics raise it, so thank you for addressing it and giving your take on that. So, okay, so I want to move on to specific objections to these physical dating and the X-ray dating and that sort of thing that was raised on the show by Hugh Ferry. So Hugh kind of says, look, in terms of the X-ray dating, you dated the whole threads instead of the individual fibers. And he thinks this might be significant because it was noted above that when you did the other dating tests, you used the fibers specifically, and you rejected a bunch of those fibers from any single thread. But yet here in the X-ray dating, you were using those whole threads themselves. So yeah, he's just saying, like, how do you respond to this? And also, why are there no margins of error or, like, you know, a 95% degree of certainty with the X-ray dating?
Knowing that who posed this question read my works very in detail, one can have a strong doubt about the intelligence of the person who formulated this question. However, I observe his fine intelligence and his astuteness, which, with this question, exploited the obvious unpreparedness of many listeners to instill in them doubts about the reliability of my results. Let me explain. Anyone who has read my works knows that the individual fibers on the olive shroud were sampled either by means of adhesive tapes placed in contact with the fabrics or aspirated, vacuumed with a suitable device. It is therefore obvious that these samplings acquired both the linen fiber from the Holy Shroud and the material that contaminated the relics for 2000 years. In the samples taken in this way, it is therefore easy to think that there are many fibers different from those of the Holy Shroud, and that therefore it is necessary to apply a subsequent method of analysis for their recognition. Unless, and this is an extremely absurd hypothesis, whoever formulates the accusation seems to think that I myself spoon the fibers thus taken to form a new thread to be studied. A thread from the Holy Shroud was obviously spun 2000 years ago, using fibers of flax of the same species. So, the allegation that I analyzed a thread containing half of the unrepresentative fibers is clearly false and absurd. As for the uncertainty that has not been assigned to the site work on X-ray analysis, see paper 1 in photo 9. Can you please show photo 9? It has been estimated to be of the order of very few centuries. It was preferred to omit in this first work because it was our intention to publish it in the second work, published in the published some month later. That is shown in paper 2, the second one, in the same photo, where we focused more on the effects of humidity and temperature, of the sample of the Holy Shroud exhibited in the various cities of its historical journey. In this work, we have in fact considered the different possible historical paths proposed for the Holy Shroud by different scholars, and for each of them we have evaluated the uncertainty corresponding to the dating performed. It is frustrating to see what level of accusation people go to against to the authenticity of the Holy Shroud, in order to try to convince some of the listeners that the most important relic of Christianity may be not authentic.
Awesome. All right, cool. Thank you so much for that. Kind of, and then kind of the next question 10, is sort of in the same line here, right? So it's focusing in on the sample selection. This is what Hugh brought up at length. This was his main objection, is in the X-ray dating again, the mechanical dating, the choice of these fibers. So you had 139 fibers were extracted, but only 46 of these contributed to the results that you got. And Hugh is kind of saying, well, this is too subjective to be credible type deal. So I just want to share my screen for a quick second and just show like the chart that Hugh was talking about in the show. So if you see, so this is what Hugh showed us, right? So you can see the samples, and he was asking, where's sample C? Why you're only using about 57% of the fibers here, or 24% of the fibers. So I think his main challenge is, like what are you selecting these samples? So yeah, what's your answer to question 10, Giulio?
I consider this an insult to my professionalism as a university professor when it is declared this is too subjective to be credible. But frequently, when the arguments to defend one's thesis are scarce, the person who produces the results is directly attacked. Therefore, I do not get down to defend myself against accusation coming from a person who, from what I know, has never been a university professor, and that at most should be discussed at the table by clarifying the individual's details that are not interesting for the public. Instead, I limit myself here to provide a satisfactory answer to the listener. The man who accuses me, probably deliberately, forgets that the assembly procedure for the fibers analyzed from a mechanical point of view was very delicate, and for various reasons only about 1 out of 3 fibers could provide results without breaking or sliding from the support. As for the use of a wall linen thread coming from the shroud, I have already answered before, and I repeat that it is unthinkable and absurd to affirm that half of the thread is unsuitable.
Okay, awesome. All right. Thank you so much for your answer on that one. Okay, so one thing that is also raised up in question 11 is, obviously you've kind of mentioned in your answers here that there are factors to take into account, and they are variable, and that can influence the results that you're getting. So, for example, things based on temperature, humidity, acidity, and mechanical deformation, how the cloth was treated throughout the centuries. So Hugh kind of says, well, look, all of Giulio's control samples that he tested to get his calibration curve were from very similar environments, namely the Middle East. And this isn't a proper test because the shroud, according to Hugh, is largely unknown in terms of these various factors. So he was saying, like, why didn't you use a much wider selection of linen, from places like Peru or medieval Europe, and or even Japan or Canada and stuff, and have that wider selection to test for these variables?
It is not at all true that carbon-14 dating is unaffected by environmental conditions. Already Professor Phillips said in the important journal Nature of 1989 that the carbon-14 dating maybe have been influenced by the energy that produced the Holy Shroud double body image that it is unexplained scientifically today. Furthermore, the radiocarbon dating of Egyptian mummy number 1716, kept in the Manchester Museum, provided different ages for the bones and the bandages. These last were about 9,000 years younger. These last were about 900 years younger than the bones. If the radiocarbons dates were trustworthy, it would lead to the absurd conclusion that the corpse would have been wrapped in the bandage about 900 years after his death. The obvious explanation for this is due to the effects of the environmental conditions. The hypothesis was at least partially confirmed by me in a recent publication. Can you please show the last slide, photo 10? In this publication, I reported the results of an analysis of the elements contained in a microscopic sample of blood taken from the shroud. Unlike common human blood samples, where nitrogen is evidenced among other elements in the relative spectra, in the sample from the Holy Shroud, the trace of nitrogen is so small that it hides behind the background noise. This, therefore, is a strong indication that, following the hypothetical intense radiation that produced the double body image, the nitrogen present in the blood was transformed in carbon-14, thus altering the isotopic ratio between carbon-14 and carbon-12, and therefore heavily altering the value of the hypothetical age of the analyzed sample. Those who criticize me about the sample selected seem not to realize the hundreds of hours that my students spent and I spent analyzing from a mechanical point of view the fibers used for the calibration of the method, after the effort I made to recover those ancient fibers. Why doesn't he provide me with all the material he criticized me for not using? Who criticized me then seems that he has not read my papers because I had to discard some ancient samples from the analysis, such as that of Lima, Peru, for mechanical reasons. Furthermore, the general criticism made to me regarding the lack of analyzed samples seems only malicious because, as I wrote in my papers, this method of mechanical dating still needs to be perfected, and for this reason, the uncertainty assigned to the result is still very high, plus minus 400 years.
All right, it's awesome. Stop sharing there. All right, cool. So I think the last so this question 12 then the last on the X-ray dating is so for the wax experiment, Hugh says that a thread was taken from the radiocarbon corner, which according to some Pro-Shroud experts say like that was the worst possible place, right? That there's an invisible reweave there. Yeah, he's kind of challenging why would you conduct an experiment from that radiocarbon corner when so many people say that's the wrong place to test?
It seems very strange to me that this person, opposed to the authenticity of the relic and still one of the few defenders of the highly criticized 1988 carbon 14 results, would make an objection of this type. If for this reason, if for this person who now, in order to criticize the results of my decades-long studies on these subjects, embraces even for a moment the idea that the corner from which the sample was taken was unreliable and scientifically incorrect because it was contaminated, it means that he himself questions the results of the radiocarbon dating, which up to now he defended against all logic. Well, this means that little by little we come to the truth. I used a piece of thread coming from that area because the crystalline properties of the cellulose do not depend on the alleged pollution. Indeed, the X-ray analysis performed have just highlighted the presence of contaminants, which, such as calcium carbonate, but obviously these results did not affect the dating of the sample of the 1st century after Christ because this information is far from the point of interest in the spectra.
Awesome. All right, cool. So thank you so much for that. I think that covers the list that we agreed upon for the questions. But just the last question there for 13, I just want to throw it open to you. Do you think that there's anything that I didn't ask you about or that I've missed about these dating methods that you feel it's really important to speak about to the audience?
Obviously, regarding the new dating methods being new, they will certainly have to be improved and engineered in the next future for wide-ranging application in archaeology. However, it is very significant that all dating methods agree with a 1st century AD age for the Holy Shroud. The only method that has provided discordant results is that of the carbon 14, which, however, we know was statistically unreliable. Before closing, however, I would like to mention an extremely important fact that did not emerge from today's interview. The Holy Shroud show a double body image, which is not scientifically explainable and therefore not even reproducible. After more than 25 years of studying this relic, I am sure that this image is the proof that Jesus Christ wanted to leave us of his resurrection. The double body image imprinted on the Holy Shroud is the only image of the whole body of Jesus Christ wanted to leave us. This image is very significant, even if not easy to interpret. In fact, according to Pope Benedict XVI, it is the mystery of cross and of light. In it, we see the signs of the immense pains suffered during the passion of Jesus, but we also see the sign of his resurrection. One can then think to the following question: why Jesus wanted to leave us this message imprinted in the most important relic of Christianity? My personal answer is that we too, pilgrims on earth, must carry our cross in order to try to become citizens of heaven in the future. Unfortunately, this proof of resurrection pushes many persons to do everything to denigrate and discredit it. And at the end of this interview, I am compelled to put in evidence again that the criticism raised against the result here discussed highlight the malice towards the truth seekers inherent in science. These persons know they are not right, but they make the public, which cannot be expert in such a specific subject, believe they are. I consider the attitude of this person a clear insult to the effort of serious scientists who for years dedicated their lives to discovery of the valuable information still hidden in the most important relic of Christianity.
Awesome. Awesome. All right, cool. Well that does it. I just want to say thank you so much for coming on. And obviously English isn't your first language, but you did an amazing job, I think, explaining the details of
Thank you.
where the skeptics go wrong. So yeah, awesome. I just want to thank you again for coming on. And you're welcome back anytime you want. I'll probably be having you on when I get to my shows on the image forming that you were speaking about at the end. So yeah, thank you for being on.
Bye bye. Thank you.
All right, take care. Let me hit the end recording.